My brain's splitting off in so many different directions. My brain's splitting off in so many different. My brain's splitting off in so many different directions that no one has the answers to. My dad was a shrink. Certain things upset me. And my dad was a shrink. Certain things upset me. And my dad was a shrink. Certain things upset me. What's the furthest star, and then what's beyond the furthest star? What's the furthest star, and then what's beyond the furthest star? What's the furthest star, and then what's beyond the furthest star? Questions that no one has the answers to.
I'm Jeremy Greer.
And I'm Gary Butterfield.
And this is Days of Future Cast, the podcast where Gary and I talk about comic books, even when the comic books don't talk back. I did not see this coming. This is weird that we read one of these Nuff Said issues during the new X-Men run, and I kind of remarked that I really dug that one. I was interested in reading this one, and then I read it, and then I don't know what we're going to do on this podcast, Gary. Like, this is, talking about this kind of stuff. At least the one in the new X-Men had like a vague plot. This just seems like a fucking, I don't know, like psychedelic trip through the mind of Dupe, which is cool. Like, don't get me wrong, it's cool, but I just don't know what we can really like talk about in this. Like, it's gonna be difficult to do a podcast about. How are you, by the way? As I said all of that.
I'm okay. I'm hungry. We're going to break for lunch after this, which I'm happy about. Need that lunch. The Nuff Said month, man. Like, the reason why we're doing two comics that dealt with this is because this is a really exciting time in Marvel, right? Like, when Axel Alonso came on to edit the X-Books, he's a guy from Vertigo. That's why we got things like New X-Men and this. This was a contemporary of New X-Men. So it was a really exciting time to read X-Men comics. You know, and then we just had Extreme X-Men stinking in the corner, just like farting uncontrollably and like, you know, secreting garbage. But we had these two really good X comics. The crazy thing about Nuff Said, I just totally steamrolled your how am I question and went into the thing. I'm sorry.
100% okay. Go for it, man.
Yeah. The craziest thing about this to me is that in modern Dawn of X comics, they just did a tribute to that new X-Men Nuff Said thing. They do a silent issue where Emma Frost and Jean Grey go into Storm's brain.
Ooh.
It's not good.
Okay.
Like, it's got cool art, but it's like, it's less plot relevant than the new X-Men one and more plot relevant than this.
Okay.
Cause this is just, art. This is pretty art.
Yeah. That's exactly what this feels like. From the cover, which is kind of a giant Dupe and all of our people, our core team coming out of his head, like breaking out of his head, and Dupe has his finger up in the shh kind of pose. Of course, there's a big stamp that says Nuff Said on it, so we know exactly what we're getting into. And our X-Force team are just hanging out. I actually like this like slice of life picture frame that we get where Edie and Guy are doing like the foot pedal thing, like the foot wrestling thing that I haven't seen anybody do since I was probably 8.
Yeah, but it's a real thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember doing this, but I like imagining doing this as like a grown person, which blew my mind. Like, I was like, oh, I guess you could still do that. Like, sure.
So they're doing that. Fat is controlling a drone. Vivisector's reading. The Spike is looking at a centerfold. The Anarchist is looking out with his binoculars, and Dupe is looking at his reflection in a mirror, popping a pimple. Yeah. And he does it. He manages to pop it. It's very gross, but because Dupe is some weird extra dimensional being, everyone starts swirling around and gets sucked into his brain.
Yes. And we're going to spend the next 20 pages basically with Dupe rescuing people out of his own brain. Is that what's happening?
Yes.
In this? So he looks around and like all of the crew is gone, and he realizes there's a hole in his head, and then he like twists himself around to look at the hole in his head and then go inside the hole in his head. And this is all taking place like the name of this issue is TikTok, I think, and like there's an X clock on the wall that like this is all going to take place within like a minute. Like, we're not going to be gone very long.
Yeah. And this is this functions as little vignettes of him rescuing them. The way he's rescuing them are like rescuing them from their worst fears, or from what Dupe thinks of them, or from their dream sequences. Like, this has the cadence of an issue where like people have dreams that reveal their secrets, which is always, it's like one of my least favorite media things. When he goes in, he sees this like wonderful like Beksinski hell dupe creature. Like this is just incredible art for what it's worth. Of it just makes it not good podcasting because I can just say over and over, it's real good.
Yeah,
but
everybody
if you're not reading
this.
along, you're kind of fucked. With all of these like dupes coming out, angry and misshapen dupes coming out, and the idea here, he looks back at the clock, like he only has a certain amount of time to rescue these characters from their individual fears or what dupe thinks about them. It is hard to say.
And we start out in a kind of weird version of The Hood, where Fat grew up, with all of these buildings kind of floating in the air, with these figures that are all in black, like shadow figures with yellow eyes, carrying clubs and chasing after him as he starts kind of losing control of his body mass. And like we go from that, which makes sense. Like I'm there. Like I know I can read everything that's happening on this. And then the very next page is like dupe fighting other dupes, and now Fat is huge and breaking through like a stained glass window. And I'm like, I don't understand anything that's happening now. So we're out the box from like page 3.
Fat doesn't break through. Dupe breaks through. So if you look at the first panel with the stained glass, right? Like Fat is facing right. From the other one, he's facing left. So this is the side that Fat is on.
Gotcha.
And Dupe has to fight through to break into
and save him. Okay.
Fat's zone.
Gotcha.
So in the next one, he's like this giant, and he rescues Fat by putting him in his mouth. It's not your fault. It's the art is not being clear here. And art, it's not his job to be 100% clear.
Nope.
Art and dialogue work together in unison in comics. That's kind of the whole point of the medium. And this whole month was a misguided nightmare. But he eats Fat, and now Fat is rescued. We cut over to Vivisector's personal nightmare, where he's in a library full of blank books, and we see a character who is his father.
You call my boy a blank book? Are you serious?
And his father, who has all these dupe speak letters on him, comes through, and we don't know this is his father, but we know he has a relationship with his father. He's menacing him, and Dupe pops out of a pop-up book and eats Vivisector like spaghetti.
Also mentioned that the dad is naked. So,
super naked.
Super naked dad carrying like a cane, like just very intense, super intense. And then, Dupe slurps him up. And then from there, Dupe sees a magazine that has the Spike on it, cross-dressing. It's called Spiky Cross-Dressing. And as he looks up out of his brain, he sees like the clock, which hasn't moved yet. So he's kind of making sure that we see that there's a time length, and we see all of these cross-dressing dupes, or I mean not cross-dressing dupes, but like dupes in weird lingerie and kind of bondage kit, like flying towards him as he eats the Spiky Cross-Dressing book. Yeah,
this is I can say now that this never pays off.
Okay,
if this is supposed to be saying something about the Spike. Like the Spike is, on some level, a transvestite or a crossdresser or trans in any way. This never pays off.
Okay.
This is weird and tone deaf. And the Spike just got introduced. Like we don't know enough about
anything
him.
about this dude. Yeah.
Yeah. To do this, like this is just weird, and it's done in just one page, which is fine. And you get to see a bunch of dupes wearing Madonna pointy bras, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Cut over to the anarchist, who is in a desert, in a planet with like 4 suns, crawling among these like big Dark Souls giant skeletons, and he's sweating.
Yeah.
Which is his power. Like his sweat keeps coming until eventually he sweats an ocean.
Mm-hmm. And Dupe swims in, grabs him, presumably saves him. We don't see that part. We just see Dupe, swimming at him. When we switch over to Edie, who is on this like panel surrounded by tubes full of goo. In the middle of the goo is floating a tongue, and she realizes her tongue has been ripped out, which I guess is supposed to be representative of like her desire to communicate or what have you. And then she starts looking through these tongues trying to figure out which one is hers, when Dupe is like, hey, over here, and like points at one. And breaks it open, and she catches the tongue and just shoves it back in her mouth. And as she's about to speak, he of course shushes her because this is Nuff Said Month. I feel like this whole bit was in the service of that joke and not necessarily in service of the character. And again, I don't really care. Like this is a one-off issue. We don't have to think about it, but it just definitely feels like, we wanted to write that joke. Like who's the character that's going to be weird about her tongue?
Yeah, it's dumb. We cut over to Mr. Sensitive, the orphan who is kind of floating in a clockwork hell. being torn apart.
Yes.
By little tiny dupes. They're crawling over him like microbes. This is a cool image. Credit where it's due. Until Big Dupe comes and rescues him from these microbes and actually ends up just pulling off his head.
Yeah.
There's a panel I like where Dupe looks at his head and he's got this like soft smile. I think this is sweet. And he pulls him out of the hole right before the clock strikes 12.
Yes.
And they can't do it.
And then he basically unfurls himself and he stops the clock from moving up as he then spits out his teammates into this weird, like, twisty Ouroboros kind of way. And then they just plop back into the room just like they were before, like nothing has passed, like no time has passed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then the second moves forward. The second that we did all this stuff is over. And that's literally fucking it.
That's it. Yeah.
How do we do a podcast about this, man?
Talk about dicks.
Like, what's in the news lately? This is a bummer, a mild bummer, just rereading, right? Like you're reading the book on Marvel Unlimited, but it only takes like a second. It's a little bit more of a bummer on a podcast, but it's our job to figure out what to do. Like, we can digress and stuff.
Sure.
It was a huge bummer reading this when it came out, because this was the only ecstatics I got for a month, So I would get an issue, and there'd be a month I would get this, which was effectively nothing, and another month, and I would get the actual next issue. So it was 2 months without like being able to continue the story, or like hang out with these characters or get anything close to content. Huge bummer.
Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't. I mean, like you said, like reading it now, like it didn't take me long to go through, and like I don't think there's a whole lot of depth here, right? Like this was definitely like let's have some fun with this issue. I was trying to look at the fold out, like the centerfold that the Spike is reading, to see if there's like any clues about this like cross-dressing thing, but no, it just looks like it's a porno mag, and I feel it's really strange to be reading a porno mag and like in the same room with your friends. So I don't know.
There are dudes that do that shit.
Yes, definitely.
I had a friend back in high school, this dude who I was like real close with when I was young, and then we kind of grew apart. Who went off to college and joined a fraternity. And he used to talk about how one of the big things they did in the fraternity was they would all put on a porn and like hang out and watch it.
Yeah.
And they had a prank where if a guy was sitting on the couch, a thing you would do is walk up and lay your dick on his shoulder and then wait to see how long it would take before he noticed it. And I want to be able to say that's weird without invoking gay panic or like being homophobic. I do think that's weird though. And also like intrusive and would make me deeply uncomfortable. Like there are many ways in which I think just leaving your dick on someone's shoulder until they notice it is fucking strange for a bunch of, ostensibly hetero dudes to do while watching hetero porn publicly together.
Yeah, it's got a real like dude bro vibe to it. Where it's like, I don't know, like I bet there's totally situations where you and maybe a friend that you were sexually active with are like watching porn and masturbating together, and maybe that's a thing, right? Like that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. In a group setting in a fraternity, it doesn't feel like it has any sort of positive sexual vibes whatsoever. It just seems like it's going to be demeaning for everybody there. And somehow even for the actresses and actors in the porn. Like it's making them worse. Like I'm sorry, Belladonna. Like they shouldn't be doing this to you. But yeah, like I knew guys that did the shoulder dick thing. And it was always like I just never understood why you want to show somebody your dick constantly. Like it's just not. Please don't do that. Like against their will. Like it's not a fun prank. Pranks aren't fun. Number one.
No, pranks aren't good, and there are better public exposure pranks. Like I talked about in Abject Suffering, the dude who I knew who used to stretch his dick over his wrist and be like, "Have you seen my penny swatch?" And I think that's kind of funny. And he would also take his testicle sack and put it out of his pants and be like, "Oh man, I sat in some gum."
Yep.
And I think that's kind of funny too. Mm-hmm. It's way more funny than just like, "What if my dick touches you?"
Yes. What if my dick was my dick, but it was on you? Like that's a much worse joke.
It's not even really a joke. And like the idea that like somebody was definitely getting off about that without somebody else's knowledge is just grody to me.
Yeah.
Putting aside any kind of homoeroticism of men just being nude around each other. Pornography, masturbation has always been like super, super private for me. So like the idea of sharing that
with my dude friends, which has always just been very confusing. Of like, well, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, you're making me have the thing, but I can't then do the thing that I want to do when I have the thing. So like, this just seems awful for everybody. Like, can we just not watch Twin Peaks again? Like, that was good.
There is a difference. Like, one of the things that I've picked up on in talking to people about sexuality, like in my life, is the idea that like there are people who it sounds like are like me and you, where it's like we're sexual beings, we get turned on, and to us that is like cool. Like, we're gonna have sex and it's gonna feel really good and we're gonna enjoy it. But that's the goal. Like, it's a little bit like an itch you want to scratch. Mm-hmm. It's fun to scratch it. You want to scratch it in different ways. You want to, but it's still an itch you want to scratch. And there are people who just like being horny and just existing in that space. Like, I'm just a little horny all the time, or I'm sexually frustrated. I want a nut, but I can't. And I just want that to be 10 hours of my day.
Yeah.
And I respect that's, I don't think that there's anything morally wrong with that, but I cannot relate to it. I think it sounds really torturous and horrible to me.
Yeah. Like, I don't need to be like constantly aroused throughout the day. Like, that's not a state of being that I need to exist in. Like, I've got other shit I gotta do.
It's called years 13 to 17.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I literally had to like tuck my dick into the top of my pants at school so you wouldn't see my boner when I was like getting up, and nothing happened.
I literally just stood up. That was it.
Yeah, we read about Great Expectations. Why did that give me a fucking?
We read about Great Expectations. It reminded me of Cruel Intentions, and then I thought about those girls kissing, and all of a sudden I've got a problem.
Yeah, I got a fucking problem, and it's like the whole day is just this weird countdown until I can get home and fucking take care of it and think clearly and become a person again.
And maybe, and look, like me and you, I think had similar. We have similar backgrounds in the fact that like that was probably what happened. Like we would go home and we'd take care of it. Like, and maybe there's a place for like these people that want to exist in a place where like, oh yeah, me and my friends would just like kind of stay super horny, and it was super cool. Like that was our whole vibe. We never really dealt with anything. It was an edging situation, I guess. But like so that like they didn't just like, maybe they didn't know that you could just jack off in private and get done. Like, you know what I'm saying? Maybe they were just like, no, I don't know, man. Like I'm all for everything. I don't really give a shit. But like, yeah, like the group sesh on porn is just very strange to me.
The best thing I can say about it is I can't relate to it.
Yeah,
it's not like or the worst thing I can say about it, rather, is I just can't relate. Like, not hurting anybody, even though that shoulder thing kind of did. And who knows if the Spike has consent from his teammates to just sit there and look at porn. Like, there's a big, on the Something Awful board, when I used to go on that, in the Ask Tell thread, there's always somebody who worked at a library. And there's a big debate in librarians whether porn should be allowed in the library.
Yeah.
Because it is this, like, bastion of, like, free speech. And it's a lot of people's only access to internet. Stuff like that. But for my purposes, like every time I've been in the library and there's just a guy openly just like watching porn, it has made me pretty deeply uncomfortable to be witness and kind of part of his sexuality. Like, I think the fact that he's doing that in public is doing something for him, and I don't consent to be part of that public. Not to mention the fact that it's just fucking makes me deeply uncomfortable in a physical, practical sense. Like, morally and ethically and intellectually, I don't like it. Also, it's really hard for me to fucking look at comics or like flip through magazines or whatever while a dude is just watching while porn is happening in my eyesight. Like,
sure. Yeah, it's incredibly distracting.
Went to like B-dubs and like one of the TVs was porn. Like, everything is college football except for one of them is fucking like hardcore squirting mamas.
And you have to figure out which one it is before you order.
One of the TVs only tells the truth, and
one of the TVs
19 of the TVs only lies. Yeah. It's a Gallagher show.
Have you ever caught one of your friends masturbating to anything? Has that ever happened to you?
No. There's no, that hasn't happened to me.
I walked in on my roommate and he was jerking off, and we're super good friends to this day. Like, it's no big deal. Like, I didn't see anything. But there was a group of us coming in the house, and like he did the obvious like trying to put it away type situation. So everybody knew, and we were young enough that we were going to fuck with him a little bit until we looked at the screen and realized he was watching Lost Highway. And apparently, and I haven't watched that movie in a while, but there's a sex scene in that and there's like, it's not like graphic or anything, but he was trying to justify it. He's like, I don't know, man, there was just something about the back of that dude's shoulder that just, I don't know, I just had to take care of it. And I was like, man, that is, sure, dude, go ahead. Like,
yeah, it's incredible. Like I absolutely adore like David Lynch as the man who makes movies with tons of sexual content that like I cannot imagine being turned on by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Man, I love it when Isabella Rossellini just gets really fucked up. That's super hot to me.
I never walked in on anybody, but there's a story that a friend of mine had. He was like one of the, like he was in a crew with people who were Boy Scouts like way later than it was cute. You know, like those people who are like we below pluses and stuff. And he was a Boy Scout. They all went down to this trip to Florida, and they were all in like a group bunk situation. And apparently one of the dudes jerked off, and everyone, when they came back to school, they're all teasing him because after he came, he did it every night. And after he did it every time, he went, he did this little like whistle, like, dude, afterwards, which is a fucking flex.
That's
like to be
flex.
Just be like, good job, me.
Yeah.
Like, I can't
feeling
read
good,
that as
feeling
anything
great.
other than,
how are you guys down there listening to me do this?
like, I just cannot read that as anything other than like self-congratulatory.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
Wow, what a load.
Man. Masturbation.
Yeah.
Everybody does it, and some people do it in front of each other, apparently. Patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv is the place to go to for more masturbation talk. I'm saying that in the cadence of a joke, but that's actually probably really, really true. This group of weird 30-something guys probably talk about jacking off a whole lot around video games. Yeah. We appreciate the support. Tell your friends, listen to or leave reviews, all that stuff. And yeah, come back to next week so we can talk about more X-Force, this time with dialogue.